We all know that the science or medicine which is a part of the science, progress always happens by two fundamental questions. Why not? And in this process, the so-called the innovation and excellence for which the our founder has been really instrumental in creating that awareness among the younger generation is really worthwhile looking at least once in a year. Now we know that Nikki has made a very emphatic point that we already know some knowledge about what are the factors which produce the disease as far as the atherosclerosis and its consequences are concerned, which is a fundamentally been known in terms of the so-called risk factors. And we have also understood over a period of time that in a given patient, in a group of patients, we know that all the risk factors cannot explain an illness. We have been using the buzzword called the residual risk. That is the most important thing. And in this context, we have gone to the fundamental aspect that all the risk factors are some risk factors which we do not know. Probably we may not be knowing in some more years to come. There is a fundamental abnormality, what we call as an inflammation of the blood vessel. This was a very vacillating point, starting with the infection process to the inflammation process. And now we have a significant amount of fundamental basic research saying that there is an inflammation going on, chronic inflammation going on, affecting the endothelium. How to move to the next slide here? This is the one? Okay. The cardiovascular diseases, we know that is the number one killer as far as we know that. And globally, it is more than about 30% mortality. In India, it's nearing to 30%. We know the factors: diabetes, lipid, hypertension. As we saw in the use of study, there have been 2, 3 new factors that have been added, which are very important. One is the obesity, another is the eating of not having enough leaf vegetables and the fruits, and the sedentary habits. They have also included alcoholism. Okay, these are some of the important factors which we should try to analyze. Demographic and genetic factors constitute into this. And we also know that in India, we have what is called the premature coronary artery disease, which is occurring in less than 40 years. In fact, we have formulated a little difference in doing even what is called the basic health checkups. We have reduced the age period to less than 35 years so that they can analyze the risk factors and try to modify their disease process. Now, the risk factors and cardiovascular disorders are concerned, as I was trying to suggest to in the beginning, we know that more than about 40% of the people, they have only one risk factor. We have understood there is a clustering of the risk factors, we have understood that there is a synergistic effect of this factor, but in spite of it, there are large number of people which is unexplainably only one risk factors are there, or there is no risk factor at all. So this is where we have to look at and find out what is really that is happening. Now, in this process, the endothelium appears to be a very important one. We all know that the endothelium is basically a diffusion barrier. It has got an important action in the vascular tone. It maintains the fluidity of the blood that is flowing through. It helps in the coagulation process, fibrinolysis system. It is also a powerful vasodilator. And most important thing is, apart from looking at the acute coronary syndromes, chronic ischemic heart diseases have got a fundamental basis on endothelial dysfunction, because there are some factors like mitogens that are produced by both the endothelial cells and as well as underlying smooth muscle cells, which are responsible for the chronic inflammation. Now, this is a fundamental statement that has come up recently. The atherosclerosis, what we talk about, is basically a chronic inflammatory disease. There is no doubt about this. And now this process occurs all over the body. In fact, the endoscopic studies and IVUS studies in the coronary arteries have shown that what appears visually as a discrete lesion, if you try to look at the iris beyond that lesion, often we find the disease process is existing. So it is an, though the manifestations are regional and sometimes is a focal in a coronary artery disease, basically it is a generalized process. Generalized process means automatically it comes to that there is an inflammation going on throughout the blood system. And in this, the last 10 to 20 years, we have seen by the recognition of the so-called elevated C-reactive protein. You know that the fundamental thinking has changed from the cholesterol levels to the dyslipidemia levels, looking at the various HDL, LDL ratios and the like. And now we have been also thinking whether we should really give a big thought of evaluating the C-reactive protein as probably a marker of inflammation in each and every patient. There is a controversy here. Should we take only primary cases or secondary prevention cases or patients who are having the so-called high-risk risk factors? This is one of the study which came from the Framingham earlier. When they looked at 10-year risk, when they added a C-reactive protein and the HCRP, the high sensitive C-reactive protein was divided into say less than 1, between 1 and 3 and 3. You know that more than 3 is considered as significant, and it says that there is a risk of cardiovascular disease increases. As you saw in this slide here, there is a consistent relationship between the levels and as well as the LDL cholesterol levels. Now, it was the early story in 2003. It said that basically the HSCRP should be evaluated for the purpose of cardiovascular risk assessment for the role of primary prevention. In 2010, the modification happened that the CRP should be done even in healthy elderly people also to identify the cardiovascular disease risk. In 2013, the ACC/AHA guidelines states that the use of CRP for stratifying high-risk patients for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So who are these high-risk cardiovascular patients, which we have to analyze, and whether it should be incorporated in every patient, keeping in mind the cost effectiveness of the test is a big issue, is a big debate that is going on. So in the general population, it is not being recommended. Probably in a high-risk patient is being recommended. There are many more factors that are circulating in the blood other than C-reactive protein, like elevated ICAM, the T-plasminogen activators, inhibitors, endothelins. All of them, can we exploit them to analyze the endothelial dysfunction is a point that is there. Should be doing one test or two tests, a battery of tests, but these have not yet come into the vogue in the day-to-day practice. We have a lot of evidence as far as this endothelial dysfunction is concerned. The coronary artery disease outcomes in terms of mortality, myocardial infarction, strokes have all been increased, and we had wonderful studies which came from Halcox, Heidzer, Goxe et al. In the beginning. And there are some studies which try to look at only patients having risk factors. The earlier group was already having a coronary artery disease or a peripheral vascular artery disease. In those with the risk factors without having an artery disease also, the Perticone et al. And Modena et al., these are the two groups which showed that definitely the outcome will be much, much worse. Now, these are the pictorial things to show how the conversion of LDL cholesterol into an oxidized LDL cholesterol triggers an inflammation process. The entry of LDL is predominantly because of the high levels as well as the endothelial dysfunction. Once it enters, it becomes oxidized. Oxidized LDL is the culprit. Now, oxidized LDL has got two important functions. One is it produces a change or an alteration in the PPAR system in the macrophage, or it produces some other changes happening in the intima. Both the intimal cells and the macrophage cells are responsibly affected, and this pathway wherein NF-kB has been increasing, producing inflammatory mediators like TNF alpha and CRP, IL-1 and IL-6. We call it as NF-kB pathway. This is an intracellular pathways. So now the focus has changed, just not looking at the endothelial outside surface, probably going inside the cell, and are the mediators that are being secreted. We have similarly another pathway, what is called kynurenine pathway, which is also to be targeted in terms of the various medicines that are available. Now these are the ones which produce a vicious circle of inflammation, and now the defense mechanism against this inflammation is possibly by using some medications which I will be trying to tell you in the future. Now as you see here, we have already got some drugs. Now in the vessel lumen itself is concerned, we have a robust evidence that the anti-lipid agents do reduce the endothelial function, improve the endothelial function. If we enter into the cell level, preventing the oxidized LDL formation or using antiplatelet drugs, PPR drugs like thiazolidines, all of them do respond for the curtailing of the inflammation. Now the drugs are concerned now that are emerging out in the present scenario are the ones what is called the tryptophan metabolites in the use of the dendritic cells, that is the so-called endothelial cells, and also use of NF-kB inhibitors, a drug called curcumin. It's a very interesting product. It's a very simple product I was discussing with my doctor friend here, which has been extracted from the turmeric, and the turmeric product seems to be a very good inhibitor as far as the NF-kB pathway is concerned. Now the NF-kB pathway, the affection is basically because the inflammatory stimuli, they produce an activation of IKKB and then in turn activation of NF-kB, which moves inside the cell, and that is where this pathway is responsibly produces the inflammatory mediators which come out of the cell, and these inflammatory mediators are responsible for the chronic inflammation in the endothelial layer. The curcumin is basically it acts in inactivating this system. We have found out that there is a prevention in the activation of the NF-kB. It also prevents the translocation into the cell nucleus, and it also prevents the release of the inflammatory media. So the three-pronged attack, and that is how the inflammation decreases, and this inflammatory anti-inflammatory role has been seen in the other parameters also, like there is a decrease in the C-reactive protein, that there is a decrease in MI incidence in post-CABG patients where it has been tried, a significant reduction in the cholesterol also. There is a prevention of the progression of the diabetic nephropathy. It has got some other actions unlike diabetic nephropathy, and also improves the fasting blood glucose, HbA1c, and insulin resistance. So it has got multiple other actions other than just curtailing the inflammation. When the kynurenine pathway is concerned in the endothelial dendritic cells, it is basically a tryptophan. It is related with that. And the 3-hydroxyanthranilic acid, I think the biochemistry is too much for you. Anyway, this is the molecule that is released after the kynurenine pathway to the metabolism of the tryptophan, and this produces an anti-atherosclerotic effect and reduction in the LDL cholesterol. We have got a lot of evidence here, as you see. The lipid metabolism, 3-HAA effect is decreasing, and we have also on the plasma cholesterol and triglycerides. It's a very interesting phenomena that there is so many benefits. This particular molecule is being used by the neurologists. There must be a lot of neurologists here, and this is also going to be a very important molecule in terms of anti-inflammatory drug effects. We have also seen an effect on inflammation, a significant reduce the infiltration of the CD4 cells on autopsy and biopsy studies. It has also an effect on the atherosclerosis, as you see in this picture, 80% reduction in the atherosclerotic lesion. So if you have a combination like an anti-lipid agent and drugs like this, probably if they try in a well-controlled studies, it has got to have a lot of scope in the future. In summary, 3-HAA is an intermediate metabolite of kynurenine pathway, that is a tryptophan metabolism. It has got some significant benefits. More than anti-inflammatory action, it improves the lipid profile. It has got definitely vascular inflammation reduction. Why are you talking about this? These are all novel agents that are coming up in there. That we are trying to look at anti-inflammatory action modification inside the cell, intermediary metabolism. We have already tried some of these drugs like antioxidants. We had variable results. There have been lovastatin and propofol combinations. Vitamin E has been tried. The HOPE study said no more benefit as far as the vitamin E is concerned. People are trying vitamin C. In vitro studies have shown that the vitamin C is beneficial, but when it comes to the application for the studies and human beings, we do not have much data available, but it is a very good antioxidant per se. There have been studies where they have used combinations. The market is flooded with these. We have vitamin C, vitamin A, and all these things are coming up and they are being used, but unfortunately, none of the well-conducted studies have shown that this combination is beneficial. So naturally, we are left with exploring and trying to innovate some other molecules, looking at the various intermediary pathways. Arginine has been tried in large doses. I think it is available in the market. Dietary flavonoids have been tried. Folic acid has been tried. Another molecule is the tetrahydrobiopterin, which is also being tried, but none of them have shown any benefit. These are already existing molecules. The innovative molecules are the ones which I already told you. Then other targets are there. Let me not go into that. SPLA2, LPPLA2, FLAP, sakinobacol, and the CCR2. These are all undergoing lot of trials and both at the experimental level. And like the nicotine, hypertension management, diabetes management, and use of the current drugs. Still 1/3 of the low risk individuals with having one single factor or no risk factors have been known to develop a significant cardiovascular disease. So this is a sizable population in whom we have to think about using some systems. What are the probable unrecognized risk factors? What are the possible manipulations at both the cellular level and intracellular level, some of the drug innovation that can be done. So controlling inflammation probably will help improve the cardiovascular outcome and may also further help reduce the morbidity and mortality in patients with the cardiovascular disease. The existing antioxidants, which we were trying to look at, supermutase, hydrogen peroxide, and many other things, the so-called free oxygen radicals, have failed immeasurably. And we have to look at various other pathways, intermediate pathways. So thank you very much. I think I have brought out two important molecules which may be having a potential value in the future. Thank you very much.